Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Only Podcast, the first one of 2015, I think, right? I don't remember last time we recorded one. Probably the first one of 2015. I'm your host, Chris Vanini, joined by Joe Toohey, Only Colors staff writer. I'm on Twitter at Chris Vanini. He's at Jobin number 2 letter E. Joe, how are you doing on this new year, in this new year?
I've been doing well. I've done a lot of traveling over the last
Oh
7 months or
yeah,
so.
I totally forgot about that. We can start off with that before we get into things. But Ben, since we last talked, been an interesting, been a positive week for Michigan State sports. Unlike the last time we spoke with everybody, Michigan State went down to the Cotton Bowl, came back, pulled out a 42-41 last-second victory. Basketball team throttled Indiana at home, and now basketball is looking a little bit more optimistic here moving forward if they continue to play like that. But we're going to start with football. We're going to kind of wrap things up, I think, a bit here. But before we get into the team, Joe, you went down to Arlington for the game, and you wrote about it a little bit. How was that experience? How was Jerry World?
So I was impressed by Jerry World as just a physical entity, but the fan experience there I thought was pretty lackluster in terms of they did a couple nice things in the tailgate lots where they had a spot that you could actually put like your hot coals and stuff like that. So we did a little bit of tailgating, and what was interesting there is that I didn't see any Baylor fans out tailgating at all. And I would have expected them to show up a little bit just because I figure that a bunch of them were driving. It's about a 2.5-hour drive from Waco up to Dallas, up to Arlington.
Was that an 11:30 local kickoff?
Yeah, it was. So that's kind of brutal.
Yeah, I'm curious how much that played into it.
Yeah, but it didn't deter the MSU fans. So I would. The other thing though is that where I was at was a lot that was passes were sold by MSU athletics department, so it's probably a little bit biased as well. But we had a pretty good time. Though the weather I would say was a rainier Nebraska. So it was pretty cold. It was really rainy. There was like a really quick minute of freezing rain where we actually had like hail, basically. But yeah, we were able to throw back a few before heading into the stadium. The thing about going into the stadium that was painful was that they had to set up these metal detectors like right along the stadium, so you couldn't, like, if you were walking around the stadium, you had to do like a very large loop. So when it's 35 degrees and rainy, it's kind of brutal. But when
those are always frustrating. Yeah, when things are kind of set up outside, so you can't take a full just general loop, and then you have to like take sidewalks out and stuff. And based on what you wrote, it sounded like it was on the inside too.
Yeah. So then, the other thing that's weird is that they didn't let you actually walk through the main concourse through the club and suite level area. So, I mean, that was really frustrating. It's like I can't even get a full tour of this stadium that I wanted to see, right? Like I mostly just wanted to walk around and see what things look like. So so that was weird too. But yeah, I would say that in terms of actual like fan experience, the Rose Bowl was significantly better, both between the weather and just like the feel of the stadium. You know, you feel like you're in a college stadium at the Rose Bowl. So yeah, I mean, but that's me complaining a lot about something that was pretty awesome. So I won't complain too much. I mean, the other thing that happened was my friend who I went to the game with came down with stomach flu right as we sat down in our seats. Yeah. So he was running back and forth from the bathroom like every 5 minutes, trying to not miss anything. And he did a pretty good job. But like we were really considering leaving at the end of the third quarter because he was really sick, and like we were down by 20. But
that would have been something.
Yeah, I'm really glad we didn't. So yeah,
how was the fan split?
I thought it was a significantly better fan split than the 2013 Big Ten championship game. It was tough to tell until the very end when all the Baylor fans left because it's all green and stuff. It was significantly louder, and I think the loudest part of the game was when Baylor got their fat guy touchdown. And so Baylor was significantly louder, but once all of the Baylor fans left, I mean, it seemed like a 65-35 split to me. that's still sort of a really rough estimate. But
I think I think they said there was about 71,000. I thought was the attendance. How full did it look? I know they have standing room only there, but was there a lot of empty seats up top, or how'd that look?
Yeah, there were a lot of empty seats up top. I would say in the MSU side, there were very, very few people who were actually in the very upper deck, and which looks really far away. Where I was technically the student section, although it was mostly there were a lot of like students who had bought tickets like for their parents as well, because students could buy up to 4 tickets, and that was basically the cheapest way to get in. My friend is a student, so that's how we got in too. And so it was like sort of students and sort of like associated people in the section that I was in, which was right above the band. But yeah, up top it was really empty, except for on the Baylor sideline where it was kind of spotty. So 71 is probably, I think about 15 or 20,000 fewer than can fit in that stadium. But for the most part, the lower bowl and sort of the middle deck where I was all seemed pretty full.
It's a stadium I noticed with all the different levels and all the different divides that it's hard for maybe bigger groups to kind of get rowdy. Like at the Sugar Bowl or at the Superdome, they're all kind of really packed in there, and it just this comes across way more like spread out and open. And I've heard plenty that the stadium doesn't get all that loud just because of how it's built. Did you feel like separated from groups based on where you were?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the section that we were in the corner was a pretty small one. So yeah, I mean, I felt a little separated from some other groups. But yeah, I mean, in terms of versus other pro stadiums, I think that's pretty standard. But yeah, I mean, it's a little different too because there's a lot of space upwards. So like at Ford Field,
right,
they have those like noise reflectors basically that hang down from the ceiling, and the ceiling is significantly lower because they don't have to deal with the size.
Yeah, it's kind of more spread out than spread up. This one goes up. You know,
Right.
you know what else goes up is Lucas Oil. I imagine this looked taller? Lucas Oil is pretty tall.
Yeah, I would say it's probably about the same. It's weird because it's hard to sort of evaluate the empty space with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially with the giant scoreboard there, right? I mean, like with the scoreboard, the way it is set up in there, it seems like a lot of the space upwards is basically just to accommodate that, right?
How is that scoreboard in real life? Is it pretty much what everybody says?
So I was in the corner. It's hard to like get a good look at it. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. It was less distracting than I expected. I expected to just kind of want to watch that the whole time, but the actual view from where we were was actually really good, even on the entire opposite end. So I'll give them that. I mean, it was the best corner, being in the corner type seat that I've ever had, where I actually was able to get a good view even on the far sideline or the far end zone. Yeah, so it was a stadium though, right? Like I don't think it wasn't a life-changing experience. It wasn't. I wouldn't even say it was significantly better than Ford Field. So yeah, I don't know. It's no football mecca by any means.
So the game, for 3 quarters, even more, it kind of played out how I sort of expected it. We talked on here that I thought MSU would get burned in the slot and burned by the speedy wide receivers, and they did, and they rarely stopped Baylor at all. Looking at the drive chart, I mean, they missed 2 field goals. I think Baylor punted once. Baylor had 1 punt, 1 turnover on downs, and 2 missed field goals in the end of the half, and an interception. So they only punted 1. They moved up and down the field at will. However, they were able to get just enough stops in the 4th quarter to keep the offense in it, which I wasn't sure if it would be able to happen. It kind of played out like the Ohio State game in that MSU kind of got off to an early lead, but as the offense slowed down, the defense couldn't get anything going, and Baylor pulled ahead. And unlike Ohio State, where the Buckeyes kept their distance, MSU was able to mount that rally in the 4th quarter, which was mighty impressive. But I guess we'll start on that side of the ball defensively. I mean, Baylor put up what was an FBS bowl record 603 passing yards. There was very little resistance there. MSU's cornerbacks and safeties got burned quite frequently on deep balls, which we kind of expected. And but they pulled, like I said, they pulled it just enough down in the fourth quarter where they got. I mean, Baylor only had really 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, not counting the one at the end, and then one late in the third, which was a missed field goal. So defensively, how did you think Spartans fared? Were you surprised by anything? Were you thought they did some things well that maybe got to get overlooked?
So the biggest surprise to me, actually after the game was over, even in the stadium, looking at the end of the game stats, and I neglected to mention this in my post for Monday, but the stat that really stood out to me for Baylor offensively was they were just 6 for 15 on third down. That really surprised me. Like the fact that they were actually surprisingly poor on third downs when it really felt like they were just kind of moving the ball at will. So what was impressive to me is the ability for MSU's defense to clamp down at the end of drives at the end of the game. And I think so. We talked a little bit in the preview about exactly what strategies they might pull out to do something like that. And I think that it was clear that it was mostly a substitution pattern solution, right? So they were playing. I hadn't seen Cole Cahoon in a game in a long time, so they were playing him. They were really rotating guys through, both on the defensive line, at linebacker, and in the secondary. And I mean, based on a small sample size of this one game, it seemed like that was a pretty effective strategy, especially by the end when those third downs really started to matter a little bit more. And yeah, I thought that was sort of the story of the game, right? Is that right when those stops started to be needed, they got them. And one thing that's a little misleading when you say 603 passing yards is that there were 5 sacks. MSU had 5 sacks for 39 yards. So
True.
once you do the sack adjustment, it's a little different, although not a lot, right? That's still 560 some yards, right? So yeah. So I mean, that still got shredded.
But well, and you mentioned the sacks, and I kind of mentioned the other thing about the defense is that, and it kind of plays into the third down, is that Baylor rushed for negative 20 yards on 22 attempts, and part of that is the sacks, like you mentioned. But they didn't get anything at all going in the running game, and maybe if they had, they were able to run the clock out a little bit more. The third downs they were in weren't, favorable situations necessarily because it was kind of big plays or no plays. So MSU's defense definitely does deserve credit for that. I saw a story in MLive that MSU has the number 1 running defense, which they do in yards per game, but with kind of how stats go, we prefer to go by yards per carry, where they ended up 8th. So still very good. But this is a Baylor team that wasn't great at running the ball, but they weren't bad. They were I think they were in the 40s or 50s at the time, and MSU completely shut that down, which was clearly part of the game plan. They wanted to take away the rushing game. The problem is Baylor doesn't really need its rushing game, and so that's kind of how the rest of the thing played out. But for the game to end with a sack, and interception, based on how the rest of that game went, it was pretty remarkable, considering they struggled to get to Petty quite a bit because of all the quick throws. So when he had to take his time back there and hit deep throws, he was able to get hit and taken down. And so defense made the stops at the end when they mattered. And offensively, Spartans put up 552 total yards, 42 points, and Connor Cook continues to just remarkably rebound from some of the dumbest plays. You'll see that interception on the screen pass. A lot of qualms with this. First, screen pass never ever works for MSU. I can think of like 2 or 3 ever that have really come away with a big gain. over the past few years. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the running back or the lineman or the quarterback or if they telegraph it, but they just can't do screen passes, and it never works. And in this situation, Jeremy Langford was bear hugged, pun, and and how that wasn't called was just remarkable because the Lions were actually penalized for the same thing in the playoff game against the Cowboys in that same stadium. But yeah, so but then he clearly wasn't anywhere close to being open. He wasn't going to be open. Connor Cook needed to either take a sack or throw that ball away, and he just flips it to nobody, to the Baylor defense, as he just right to them, and it was like that was incredibly boneheaded, and it should have clinched the game. But I think it was Sean Oakman who committed a pointless block in the back and the return that pulled it back. After the returner had already gone by. So that should have ended the game right there. But it didn't. And Cook comes right back, runs quite a bit, and they get him down to the end zone and make it a one-score game. And it makes you think of the Rose Bowl where he threw that really bad pick six, which was also a screen pass that didn't work. Once again, just another example of the screen pass just not working. And he leads them down, he leads them into the end zone, and things keep going from there. He puts bad plays behind him remarkably well. And it sounds like he's coming back next year. So next year when he's being evaluated by scouts, you can be sure that his resiliency and mental makeup and focus will get high marks in that sense. Of course, throwing the pick six in the first place won't, but that's something you can teach. You can't teach a kid to come back from bad plays, and Cook has been able to do that. He finished 24 for 42, 314 yards, 2 TDs, 2 INTs. Both interceptions, I believe, came in the red zone. Or I'm not sure of the screen pass one. The other one was another one was down near the end zone. They were still able to overcome that, which is just remarkable. And on the ground, Jeremy Langford does this thing again, 27 carries, 162 yards, 6 per carry, 3 TDs. He did get 65 on one play, but he again was moving solidly. Nick Hill, I was really surprised that Nick Hill got as much as he did. 7 carries, 26 yards, didn't do much of anything, had a long of 12. 0 carries for Delton Williams, who is likely going to be your starting running back next year. And now when you think of past bowl games, when Kirk Cousins played in the 2008 Capital One Bowl, for Delton Williams not to get a single carry in this game was very surprising. He did have a catch for 5 yards, but that was very surprising because Nick Hill, as we've talked about all year, he's been a serviceable backup, but doesn't bring anything to the table that Langford doesn't, while Delton Williams does. And as usual, Cook spread it all around. I think, what do we got here? Like about 10 players caught a ball. Mumphrey, Burbridge had 4, Lippett had 5. So you're losing Mumphrey and Lippett next year, but I think you still got a solid depth of receivers there next year. Just an overall solid performance by the offense when they weren't shooting themselves in the foot with those terrible turnovers. Not only that, but let's talk about this, the fake field goal. I mean, you saw that coming, right? Everybody in the stadium had to have seen that coming, right?
That was, I mean, yeah, I think in that situation, indoors, I would have kicked a field goal just because of the distance. I mean, it was thinking, right? Yeah, I mean,
you got 3 options there. 4 options, I'm sorry, and 3 of them are good. Go for it. You're kind of in go for it territory. Kick it.
Right.
You're indoors, or punt it, which wouldn't have been great. But to fake it after a timeout when you just know they're going to be ready for it was
yeah, I agree.
It was surprising.
I really think
it's up there with the fake against who was it? Who was Notre Dame?
Yeah, in 2011.
Yeah, it's right up there with a very clear one coming, and they still go for it. D'Antonio's best fakes are always when you're not expecting them at all, and the ones when you're expecting them, they haven't worked out.
Yeah, including, I mean, like I thought the classic one that nobody was expecting that worked out really well was the 2011 Big Ten Championship game 2-point conversion, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like who goes for a fake in that situation?
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought so. So I was talking about the offense there. I was in the stadium. I was flipping out in the fourth quarter with the mix of plays that was called. I mean, they were really patient with the offense and continuing to run the ball. And
I thought Dave Warner called a great game.
it was, yeah. I mean, we always, during the Roushar era, we really gave him, a lot of criticism for calling poor games, and I think we're not giving enough credit to Dave Warner here for calling a great one. The mix of plays I thought was perfect, and yeah, you're right. It is odd. The substitution patterns have always been a little strange. I don't know why they decide to substitute guys in when they do. I mean, in the past, Antonio has explained that away by saying that it's sometimes difficult to keep track of all of the guys who are playing all at once, and so on defense when they're doing that as well.
And a lot of times,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see all of that.
A lot of times it comes up to a lot of times it comes down to the running backs coach, but in this case, Warner is the running backs coach, so he kind of knows what's going on there. Speaking of offense, one of the biggest things to come out of this game, memes of him standing there at the coin toss with his jersey up and all the muscles everywhere, and it's very, very intimidating. And he was the one who was not shy to trash talk the Big Ten, trash talk Connor Cook leading into this game. He said the Big Ten wasn't interesting. He said Connor Cook would get scared, to which Connor Cook replied, I have Jack Conklin. And he did have Jack Conklin. And Oakman did not do much. Oakman got one sack, a pretty big sack. But outside of that, he didn't do much of anything. Only finished with 3 tackles. Cook wasn't pressured all that much. I think Conklin continues to prove himself to be one of the best offensive linemen in the country, really. Remains extremely underrated, the redshirt sophomore. He'll be back next year, and he'll be a candidate to possibly leave before his senior year with how he's playing. The guy who came in as a 0-star recruit, coach's son, that they've built into just a monster on that left side, and that's so big for Cook and just any quarterback, how well Jack Conklin plays there at the left tackle spot.
Yeah, and I think that plays into, so what you're talking about with the offensive line quality plays into your previous point about screen passes, right? So the screen pass is an effective strategy when the quarterback is getting pressured and you want to relieve some of that pressure, but when, especially with a really good blitz pickup guy like Jeremy Langford, when you're picking up those blitzes, when you're blocking that defensive line, I don't see why the screen pass at that point was necessary. I just didn't feel like Cook was getting pressured in such a way that was needed.
I could see it in a situation if maybe they thought they were going to be getting blitzed, but they had been moving the ball pretty well, without it. But it's easy to hide. I'm not as confused as the timing of it as just the sheer idea of using it, just because it's never proven successul.
Right, and then of course
for whatever reason.
I just heaped all this praise on Dave Warner, and now I'm criticizing him also. So, the other thing that really stuck out to me, and this is actually going back to the other side of the ball for a second. So, and maybe I'm just confused about this rule, but those outside passes that Baylor was throwing, like 4 or 5 yards down the field, where it was like a very clear pick play on the outside. How is that legal? Are you allowed to do that? Because
it kind of comes back to the Oregon game and the Florida State Notre Dame game, where you kind of you can rub, but you can't pick. It's kind of up to the officials' discretion. I believe it was something they mentioned that on the broadcast. I think they mentioned that D'Antonio was complaining about that. I might have been thinking of something else, but they did that a lot. They'd line up receivers back to back and kind of run a bit of a pick. There.
I think, so there's 2 things. One is if that's a legal play, then that should be in every offense's playbook completely, and then it should be legislated out of the game, because it just seems like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem sporting, right? It doesn't seem like it would be good, right? Like,
that's such a Big Ten. That's such a Big Ten comment. It's not sporting.
Get a hashtag Big Ten in there. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. That really made me mad in the stadium as it happened. It was like, it seemed unnecessary for Baylor anyways. Like, if they're gonna be throwing quick passes, why even bother, potentially getting an offensive PI called on you for something like that if you're really completing passes down the seam like they were. And just the sheer number, I mean, looking at Baylor receivers, Katie Cannon had 8 catches, Corey Coleman had 7, Antoine Goodley had 9, Leve Norwood had 6. Like, that's amazing to have that many guys catch that many balls. I mean,
Yeah, and Cannon's a freshman, I believe.
Yes, I believe that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they've just got just an incredible load of talent there. And they will continue to dominate offensively. Art Briles does a tremendous job there. Now, before we kind of wrap up the football game, we'll wrap up the game, then we'll briefly talk about maybe what's next for the football team. But I said in my 3 takeaways that quite simply MSU was very, very lucky to win this game. You had the block in the back on the pick 6 that negated that. That would have ended the game just from a numbers standpoint. You have Baylor missing a field goal. You have the blocked field goal that came after the never called offensive mask against on Tony Lippett there that moved them back. I remember Jeremy Langford had a touchdown run against Indiana where he dragged the defender probably 10 yards into the end zone, just pulled him along with him by grabbing his face mask. They never call that, and especially in a situation like that, to make that call was very surprising. But credit to MSU's D for holding them and forcing them into the field goal spot too, and for getting the block and returning it back. But so much had to go right. I know they had less than a 1% chance, according to ESPN, at some point in the fourth quarter, and the planets really needed to align for that to happen. And I think that's what should make the comeback pretty special too, because that was just incredibly unlikely. And D'Antonio's tenure has always been about just doing unlikely things, and to have back-to-back BCS quality bowl wins against top 5 teams, 2 completely different styles in Stanford and Baylor, continues to elevate the national respect for MSU and honestly completely validated the rest of the season. We'd been talking for weeks that MSU's resume was pretty much based on the Rose Bowl win last year and starting so highly ranked. They had nothing on their resume that had said that if they were unranked to start the year, they wouldn't have been in a New Year's Six Bowl. They only made it because of their reputation, which is a crazy situation for Michigan State football to be in. But to beat a top 5 Baylor team, a Big 12 champion Baylor team, all of a sudden another 11-win season, you don't have to look back in the season and say, well, how good really was that team? Now we know it was a really good team. They got lucky, like I said, but they won. They beat a very good Baylor team, and they only lost to the 2 teams in the national championship game. So it wasn't there's no more questions about how this season is. It's another extremely good season, and I think the Cotton Bowl needed to happen for that respect to come back. I know USA Today's Dan Wolken tweeted at halftime that no team was more overrated than Michigan State, and at the time you couldn't really argue it. They hadn't done much of anything, and now they've gotten that one marquee win that sort of validates everything else.
Yeah, absolutely, and also as we transition into talking about what's next, I mean, the fact that this Cotton Bowl win occurred will ensure that something similar in terms of national respect will happen going into next year. And MSU will get the benefit of the doubt. They play Oregon in week 2, and that non-conference schedule that we've talked about a couple times now will be really interesting. But at the same time, the upshot of this win now is that MSU's almost certain to be ranked in the top 25, right? Probably top 20.
They'll probably be top 10 next year preseason. Right. I think just solely because of having Connor Cook back, which is huge.
Right. So yeah, I mean that in and of itself, that's going to be a huge boost in the potential situation where the ranking at the end of the year matters for a Big Six Bowl for potentially the playoff next year. I mean, that's a long ways away. I don't know. I have no idea if that would be sort of even a possibility, but it helps to have that boost at the beginning.
Absolutely. Like I said, they wouldn't have made the Cotton Bowl if not for winning the Rose Bowl last year, and they'll be in a good spot to start off next year. And the biggest question marks will come defensively, where you lose Pat Narduzzi, defensive coordinator, you lose Tawan Jones, you lose Curtis Drummond, you lose Trey Waynes, you lose Marcus Rush, and Shalik Calhoun's status remains up in the air. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens now, because theoretically Darian Hicks is now your number one cornerback, and he got burned quite a bit in this system, which makes me really wonder what types of changes Harlan Barnett and Mike Tressel are going to make as the co-defensive coordinators, because I don't think you can't play this. They can no longer play this type of defense, I think, with the horses that they're going to have, because it was shown this year that against the top teams, against the strong offensive teams, that you can get burned, and you can get burned a lot. And it was the same mistakes from beginning to end. I don't know if you could say the defense got that much better from beginning to end of the year, partly because of the competition that you kind of had to judge it off of. But I'm going to be very interested to see what types of defensive changes they make. Narduzzi was an extremely aggressive play caller, but I don't think with the safeties and cornerbacks you're going to have, it's going to be able to sustain. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have changes, take away some of the aggressiveness, because Darian Hicks, isn't strong enough to play that press coverage. The safeties haven't done a great job of playing the speedy receivers in the slot, so they're going to have to kind of change things up a bit, I think. And on the other corner spot, I think Demetrius Cox will be an interesting name to look for. He played quite a bit as the third corner this year, and played pretty well, I thought. He was a safety originally, but I thought he played pretty well at corner this year. He did give up a touchdown in the Cotton Bowl as I was tweeting that he was playing a really good game. But I think there's young talent there, but I don't know if it's physically going to be able to play the same style of defense.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Cox and Monte Nicholson both transition into starting roles. I'm not sure which one of those two will be at safety and which one of those two will be at corner, but I think they're probably both too talented to keep off the field like they were this year. And yeah, to see how much R.J. Shelton might play into any of those plans as well. I think that the fact that Lippett was able to have success on the offensive side, even though he was still playing additional snaps defensively, was something to sort of, as a proof of concept, right? Proved that it's possible that you can do both of those things, especially with a pretty deep receiving core with McGarrett Kings and Josiah Price and Aaron Burbridge coming back. So that'll be it. It will be very interesting to see how those battles play out in camp, and if when we see Oregon in week 2, if there's any major change there, where maybe they go to a straight 4-2-5, where instead of having a star that's sort of a linebacker hybrid, it's just a fifth defensive back. That would be really interesting.
It might depend, and I'm also curious how much they'll stay in their base, because that was the whole deal with this defense, is that they pretty much just stay in their 4-3 no matter what they're facing, and it makes everything easy to adjust to on the fly. But if you're playing a team like Baylor, if you're playing a team like Oregon, if you're playing a team like Ohio State, you're not going to have the horses to match up with those offenses. I was surprised they didn't play as much nickel or even dime coverage, especially with how they were defending the run. I was surprised they didn't change things up, because they weren't stopping them at all, except for a few times on third down. But they were giving up big play after big play. They continued to in this game. Leave in single coverage, and part of that is on Baylor too. Bryce Petty made some remarkable throws, but because this defense is, we've said it before, this defense is all about forcing college offensive players to do things most of them can't. Most quarterbacks can't make the throws Bryce Petty makes. Most receivers aren't as fast in the slot as Baylor's wide receivers, and the result is 600 passing yards and 42 points through 3 quarters. So there's a lot of things to look at here. It'll be interesting. Offensively, you lose Langford, you lose Lippett, you lose Mumphrey among the skill guys. You lose Travis Jackson on the line, and is that it? You got Jack Allen back, Conklin will be back, Donovan Clark will be back, and you lose Connor Cruz, who didn't play in the bowl game because he was hurt. He kind of dealt with injuries throughout the year. So you're really only losing 1.5 starters there on the line. And it'll be Delton Williams. And Delton Williams, when he's played, has proven very serviceable, quite good power running back. It'll be interesting to see if guys like Gerald Holmes and other guys get into the mix there. But sounds like Cook will be back, and he'll probably preseason be listed as a Heisman candidate. And if he continues his growth as a player, there's no reason to think he won't be in that mix. And he has very much improved from year 1 to year 2. He made far more bigger plays this year than he did a year ago. And it'll be interesting to see where he goes next year.
Yeah, absolutely. The other name I would want to toss out there is Madre London, who was talked about a little bit for playing time even this year, which was a little on the crazy side just because of the depth. I think there's the potential there for a tweak to the defense to help it deal with the sort of attacks that Oregon and Ohio State have been running, and then continued progression from the offense where there will still be offensive line depth and skill guys, skill depth, it seems like. It's exciting, and next year should be another great year.
So now we'll kind of transition into basketball here. There's only one game, and I didn't quite catch all the second half, but I believe this was Farnsworth 70-50 against Indiana.
Exactly.
From start to finish, MSU was just ferocious defensively. Brandon Dawson played a very good game, and the Spartans cruised over a team that's pretty close to them in terms of NCAA tournament bracketness. It was a win that they had to have. It was a win that they got, and a win that they emphatically got. Did that game change your outlook at all? Last week we were talking quite pessimistic about how things were looking. Did this one game, change the outlook for you at all?
Yes and no. The reason I say that is this team is now sort of how I envisioned it, and I know how KJ sort of envisioned it. At the beginning of the year, with some doubt about exactly who initiates offense, who takes over at the end of games, it seemed just in an abstract way that it should be a team that's based on defense, a classic Izzo defense team. Defense and rebounding is the way that this team should go. And so I was really confused before the season when Izzo talked about the offense being, close to what it was like in 13-14, and the defense having some ways to go. And so what is nice to see is that they have that gear defensively, especially at home. I think it'll be a little more difficult on the road to sort of clamp down in the way that they did, but to create offense out of that defense, right? So the ability to get out into transition. There were so many dunks in this game. There was a great alley-oop to Gavin Schilling. There were 2 or 3 great Dawson dunks in transition. I mean, they were doing a good job of getting open shots in transition in a way that they weren't able to do against Maryland. So against Maryland, they were, I think, attempting to get out in transition a little bit, and Maryland just did too good of a job in defending that. But that has a ceiling, right? If you play a team like Maryland or another team that can defend in transition, like Iowa, for instance, who we play tomorrow, that can create issues. If you aren't able to get offense in transition and things bog down, then it becomes a problem. So, and then the other problem there is Izzo teams have never ranked very well in terms of defensive turnover percentage. It's just not how the defense is set up. So without the turnovers being generated to generate offense, trying to get transition opportunities after missed baskets can be a little bit more difficult. So, and per Hoop Math, MSU is number 28 in the nation in terms of field goals attempted per total field goals attempted in transition. So transition field goal attempts divided by total field goal attempts.
How does that relative to the rest of the country? Does it have like a ranking?
Yeah. So MSU is number 28 in the country.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that's pretty high. They're really trying to get out in transition, and they're a little lower in terms of effective field goal percentage on those transition attempts. Number 56 in the country, but that's still 61.3 percent effective field goal percentage versus 54.7 in general in total. So they're still getting significantly better looks in transition, and they're trying hard to get there. But I think that is something that's going to have to continue going forward in Big Ten play. I think that's really where the offense is going to come from without the ability to create in half court sets. I mean, I think they still had an issue there. Early on, they got jumpers from both Matt Costello and from Tum Tum Nairn, and those aren't always going to go down, but they were big lifts at the time. But yeah, that'll be really interesting.
I've determined that Nairn making a basket is my new citing hashtag.
Oh yes,
It
absolutely.
took quite a while for me to figure out one, and I think that's what's going to be, because it's infrequent, and they're supposed to be infrequent. I originally did it because Austin Thornton, I didn't expect him to make a bunch of threes, and then he did, and so I moved on to Appling, and he was incredibly hot and cold. But I agreed with your statement that this is now starting to look like the team we expected, a team that can give a very strong effort on the defense and kind of scrap together enough on offense. But the way the season started, it was the offense that was kind of carrying the team and the defense lagging behind, which is odd. But now you look at it, they're in KenPom, they're 44th in adjusted offense, 10th in defense, and we've seen that over the last two games, especially against Maryland and Indiana, where the defense has been very, very strong. And actually, on the year, they haven't given up 70 points, or they only gave up 70 points in regulation to Duke, the only team to hit 70. They actually hit 81. Nobody else who has reached 70 did it in regulation. There were a couple overtime games there that pushed them over. But so the defense has been very strong. We're starting to see that. Brandon Dawson, especially, when that effort is there on defense, it seems to translate into the offense. And as we kind of get going into Big Ten play here, a really interesting piece is Javon Best, the true freshman who has played sparingly due to injuries. But when he has played, he's made very much of an impact. He's considered a bench warmer based on the minutes played on KenPom, but he rebounds well. He hasn't turned the ball over. He has not turned the ball over all season. He doesn't shoot great on the free throw line, but he doesn't shoot great at the line, but he has gotten to the free throw line. He's 5 for 9 on twos on the season, but only 6 for 12 at the free throw line. So he's a wing piece who I think can provide a lot offensively and defensively. And KJ, I believe, was today on Twitter calling for him to start, if I'm looking back here.
Yeah, so the talk from Izzo actually was that ideally, so against Indiana, Tum Tum Nairn got that start. I think a lot of that was in an attempt to get some offense off of the bench. And I think, and what Izzo said post-game is that that's the idea, is to have Best start and then bring Forbes off the bench. And so your starting lineup would be Trice, Best, Valentine, Dawson, and then Schilling or Costello. Schilling's been getting that start recently, but I think Costello sort of outplayed him at the tail end of non-con and here in the beginning as well. But either way, those two guys are basically just going to split 50-50 down the middle the minutes. So that's an exciting lineup to me. It's really big and it can really rebound, and that's a good thing because I think that it's going to be a big element of the offense, is offensive rebounding, and also defensively in terms of getting out in transition as well. So I'm really excited about Best. I mean, he still seems like he's maybe not in great shape yet.
Yeah, I'm sure that's one thing Izzo's working on.
But also in person. So I also went to this Indiana game. It was the Izzone alumni reunion game, so I was there on Monday night. And one thing that struck me just between guys on the court was that Costello is listed at 6'9", and Javon Best is listed at 6'5", and one of those two is off, right? Like Best look like maybe an inch and maybe 2 inches shorter than Costello. So either Costello is a little shorter than he's listed, or Best is a little taller. But 6'5" is not. It seems wrong to me. I think he's maybe a little bigger than that. So if you're talking about a lineup of Trice, Bess, Valentine, Dawson, Schilling, I mean that's 2 6'5" guys, a 6'6" guy, a 6'9" guy, and Trice. So that'll be really interesting to see how that stacks up against some of the lineups.
It's kind of a weird time of year to be experimenting with lineups, because that's kind of what Izzo always does throughout the non-conference play. But at this point, kind of with where they're at, he's got to try as many things as he can, and it appears it's going to be another change that he makes. So they play Iowa. If you're listening to this before the Iowa game, Spartans are 1-point underdogs on KenPom, and I think 3-point underdogs in Vegas. MSU is actually up to they were listed on the bubble in the recent brackets, but they're number 17 in KenPom, and that's because they have 4 of those 5 losses were by 5 points or less, or in overtime. So that margin of victory is, as we've talked about, is kind of important in that sense. But we kind of take things as they go with this basketball team. Every game, it seems to be a different, almost a different team out there. Like they're still working through different pieces, but I think they've different guys have shown, potential at times. It's just going to be getting enough guys, having on nights in the important games, because I think we can anything can happen on any given night.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're still at DEFCON 3. If we get a win at Iowa, we'll back down to DEFCON 4, but especially on the road at Iowa.
Isn't 5 higher?
No, 5. Yes, no. So 5 is like there's no potential for. So 1 is the worst. So it's an inverse scale. But yeah, we're at 3 still because there's going to need to be some quality wins, especially away from home. I think the committee looks at wins on the road specifically. So getting a win at Iowa would be a major win, and I don't think it can be understated, especially if Iowa ends up being a bubble team as well. Some with the number of teams on the bubble in the Big Ten, these games like against Indiana, against potentially Illinois or Minnesota, getting those wins might bump some competition out of that bubble conversation too.
And other numbers, we had mentioned that MSU had never previously exited non-conference play without a top 100 KenPom win since it started in 2002. Since then, Loyola and Marquette have both moved into the top. They've moved into the 90s, so technically MSU has 2 top 100 non-conference wins. And if you're keeping track, Texas Southern, who was a sub 300, I believe a sub 300 or a sub 250 team at the time, they were 283 when they played MSU. They're up to 153 now. After beating MSU, they lost at Auburn by 1, and then they beat Kansas State. So they're at 5-10 overall, but 2-0 in the SWAC, and could very well come out of that conference if you're curious how bad that loss is looking back. Texas Southern's, in terms of MSU opponents, Texas Southern is now ahead of Oakland. They're ahead of Rider. They're ahead of Santa Clara and the Citadel and Navy. So turned out to be one of the tougher non-conference games, although a loss at home to them was obviously a bad mark. But it's just an interesting team to look back on and see what they're going to kind of do moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, they're above Rutgers, for instance. So, yeah, I mean,
what are you thinking about the rest of the Big Ten right now? Because Purdue went into Wisconsin tonight and nearly came away with a victory. So maybe the Badgers aren't as head and shoulders above as everybody looked, but it kind of looked like Wisconsin, then Maryland, and then just a whole bunch of who knows what's going on.
Yeah, I was impressed by Ohio State coming out of Minnesota with a win last night. I think actually the sort of soft lower middle that I've been talking about is still there. Michigan maybe a little better or sort of improving as well, but there's still 5 games against Northwestern, Penn State, Nebraska, and Rutgers, and those are all greater than 100 ratings on KenPom. I think that it should be 5 wins there, right? So then you're at 15-5. The math will work eventually. You get Purdue at home, you get Michigan at home. So games, they're the wins to be had.
The wins to be had are definitely coming up here. If they, like you said, if they can get the Iowa game, they should win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 6, 7 of the next 8, other than at Maryland.
Yeah, which you figure is the loss, right? I mean,
they're at least a 75% favorite in 6 of those, along with 69% against Nebraska. I mean, they're 86% against what Michigan's doing right now. So this is a stretch of games here where they can start to kind of pad that record. But tomorrow's game against Iowa is a very big one in that sense.
Yep, and the other one to circle on your calendar is the Valentine's Day game in East Lansing against Ohio State. That'll be another opportunity to notch a win against a pretty good opponent. But yeah, I think this Iowa game is nearly as big as an opportunity to beat a team on the road that's pretty good, but not unbeatable.
Yeah, I mean, KenPom has been going 12-6 right now in the conference, but like we said, any day you can kind of get a different team. They haven't proven to be very consistent at all, especially if the 3-pointers aren't going down.
Right, and Iowa has the length and the depth to really defend and transition very well. So if this is a total slog, I would not be surprised in any way. I mean, this could be maybe not MSU Maryland level ugly, but could get really ugly just because both teams seem to have the ability to defend the other team in the way that they want. It'll be really interesting.
My initial thoughts are that Iowa's going to take this one. I think the Hawkeyes have proven to be pretty good this year.
I agree.
I mean, KenPom gives them a 46% chance. That's kind of inflated by the margin of victory losses that MSU had. But it's going to be a tough one there for MSU. So as we wrap things up here, going back to football, we got the national championship game, and the Spartans are the only team to have seen both Oregon and Ohio State face-to-face. Coming out on the short side both times. Jim Harbaugh will be part of ESPN's coverage of pre-game coverage for all the hoopla. A bit surprised Mark D'Antonio hasn't been on a media trail at all to kind of talk about it. I don't know if maybe he's declined requests to get ready for recruiting or whatnot, but I feel like he would have been a pretty good guy to have on the set there, considering what he knows about both. I know he had his teleconference recently, and he was asked quite a bit about that. But it's an interesting matchup. Ohio State down to third-string quarterback Cardale Jones, beating Alabama, and Oregon doing what Oregon does. Joe, what are your thoughts on this game? Who do you think is going to come out on top?
So is Ekpre Olomu playing for Oregon or no? Is he still out?
I think he's still out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that I think is going to be a big difference because I think Ohio State's offense really has not missed the beat at all. To put up, the numbers that they did against Alabama was really impressive. So I'm gonna go with the Big Ten speed on this one. I think Ohio State pulls it out. I think it'll be a classic though. I think it'll be a really close, really high scoring game. Let's say 45-42 Ohio State.
Whoa, that's a lot of points.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher than that too.
I think Ohio State's an incredibly good team. I think the coaching staff has done an incredible job this year, and as if what they've done over the last 3 years hasn't been enough, I think it's very clear Urban Meyer's Ohio State team will kind of control its place in the Big Ten for a while here, unless MSU can be the only one to really crawl back, because the future is very bright there with what they've got going on. But I'm going to go with Oregon. Ever since that loss to Arizona, they've just been hitting on all cylinders on all sides of the ball. It's a team that just seems incredibly confident, incredibly focused, incredibly talented, and smart in knowing what they're doing. I know turnovers were a factor, but to beat Florida State 49-20 and just flatten them was just really impressive. And I think Mariota, Oregon avoids the crucial turnovers. I think they're among the fewest turnovers in the country, and they are missing some players like the cornerback, like you mentioned. But I think it's gonna be I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a great game. But I think Oregon's gonna come out this year, maybe a 42-38 final score. So should be interesting. Do you think Big Ten should be rooting for Big Ten in this situation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as much as Ohio State is, going to be difficult to recruit against, I don't think that that's going to change much whether or not they win or lose this game. I think getting the first national title for the Big Ten in the last 13 years would be a really huge thing for the conference.
It would help put away that stat. And, New Year's Day was a pretty big day for the Big Ten, taking down Baylor, Alabama, and Auburn. So I think Ohio State winning would be a good step for the Big Ten. And I know a lot of people say, you can't root for them because it'll hurt you in recruiting. But, Michigan State's not beating Ohio State out for many recruits anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think one win or two wins is going to change. But I think MSU's reached the point where they don't need to worry about what other teams are doing to affect their standing. They're clearly a top 10 program. They could end up in the top 5 again. MSU is where it's at, and what Ohio State does or doesn't do, I don't think is going to affect that much. But
you should tell that to all the residents of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, well, I kind of threw out a poll before the Alabama game. I said, MSU fans, are you rooting for Ohio State? I probably got a 2/3 yes, but it was definitely all the Michigan fans said no. And that's why that's a rivalry. And I'm sure if it was Michigan in the championship game, all the MSU fans would be saying no. So
yeah, I agree with that too.
Kind of how things go. But Big Ten's looking up. Michigan State football's looking up. Michigan State basketball's looking up. So it'll be an interesting week here of different things going on. So it's going to do it from us. Make sure you're always checking out theonlycolors.com for fun and interesting stories, and hang out in the comment section where we love to talk about all sorts of stuff. I'm Chris Vanini on Twitter at Chris Vanini. Joe is at Jobin 2 letter E, Jobin 2E. So for Joe, this is Chris, and we will talk to you guys later. See ya.
See ya.